Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going through the best tanks for the upcoming Maneuvers event. I know this is a question a lot of you have been asking in various Twitch chats, Discords, whatever else. I'm going to sum it up for you with the best heavies, mediums and tank destroyers that you can take in the upcoming Maneuvers event. So let's get right into it. Starting off with the Object 260. This tank is going to be very well known to many of you. Obviously, you do have to have completed the missions to get it, but this is probably the best tank you can pick. It has armor, DPM, pushing power, it's great in brawls. However, it is prone to the fires and the ammo racks, so you are going to want to run experimental equipment on it, but Object 260, in my opinion, is the best heavy tank. Then the second best heavy tank is the IS-7. Armor, once again. Pushing power, once again. It's good in brawls, once again. However, it does struggle with lower DPM and similar issue to the Object 260 with its fires and ammo racks. So once again, another tank to probably run experimental equipment on. Then we have the BZ-75. This tank's a little bit more interesting, so I'll talk a little bit more about this tank. Obviously, it does have the boosters, so it has its rocket boosters, which do give it a unique capability. It's really good for taking really quite aggressive positions or pushing really quite aggressively to a certain position. However, when you do run out of those boosters, it's pretty slow, pretty sluggish, and pretty inflexible. However, you do have decent armor. The armor itself is pretty troll, so you will pull off some miracle bounces here and there. Obviously, the boosters. You have a decent alpha, which does definitely help in those kind of brawly scenarios. However, another issue with the tank is it does have a weak ammo rack, and to an extent, a weak engine/fuel tank, so another one you're probably going to want to run experimental equipment on. The experimental hardening, that is. Okay, then we've got the E5 for the last of the heavy tanks. DPM. Yeah, pretty great on this tank. Its armor, pretty trolls, pretty nice in a pushing/brawling scenario. God, that's a mouth twister. It has decent gun handling and depression. However, it kind of does tend to rely on a hull down. It's not the best in an all-out brawling scenario. It's going to be better on some maps than others, but the E5's DPM and its trollish armor will allow it to be pretty flexible. However, it isn't the quickest. Right, before you all crucify me in the comments below, this is not an exhaustive list. Do not get me wrong. There are other tanks that are great. There are other tanks that are interchangeable. For example, the Object 277 for the Object 260 and the IS-7. This is just my opinion on what the best tanks are. There obviously are others. 279E is another great option. Object 452K, another good option. Kampfpanzer, another good option. You get the idea? So, the mediums. The best one, in my opinion, CS63. You have the ridiculous speed in the turbo mode, which allows you to take some really aggressive positions, which are pretty influential in the 7v7 mode. Obviously, you do have to be careful you don't be too aggressive, get isolated, and then therefore die. Losing one tank in 7v7 is significantly more important and detrimental than in 15v15. But the CS is great for pushing other tanks as well. That's another thing to consider. 2 CSs pushing 2 IS-7s, they are rapid. You've got the DPM, however, you do struggle with the gun handling and the low penetration, which is a little bit of an issue, but the CS is more for getting your vision instead of a light tank, pushing other tanks into a location, and taking an aggressive early game crossfire position. Essentially, that's what you do with the CS. Object 430U. You have armor, you have speed, you have a decent HP pool. It's a pretty good brawling tank. It's the kind of pseudo-heavy medium tank. It's like a light, heavy medium. So it will do a decent job in a kind of all-out push brawl scenario. However, you do want to be as close as possible with this tank, definitely not sniping, because its gun handling is terrible, and it does suffer with similar issues to the 260, the 277, and the BZ-75, with it having a weak ammo rack and suffering from the usual Soviet fires through the lower plate. So it's kind of an all-or-nothing pick. You probably take the 430U if you're going to be pushing something pretty aggressively. That's my opinion, really. So, then we've got the 121B. And this is a strange pick, I know. Some of you may be going, really? I've played maneuvers now, both previous events, and the 121B for me has been a really good pick in my teams. It has really good heat penetration, so it can be pretty reliable at most distances. It has good DPM. Its armor is surprisingly trollish. However, it does suffer from the low HP, and it tends to rely on playing on distance. So don't get me wrong, the 121B is not the best tank for Ensk, but you get a Sand River, you get a Corellia. The 121B is great just because of its heat penetration. Its gun handling isn't incredible, but it's neither a weakness or a strength, really. But yeah, I've had really good experiences, and I've had some players have really good games with the 121B in maneuvers. It seems to be a pretty reliable tank, so that's why it's on my list. Then we have the Centurion Action X. This tank is pretty great. However, it does suffer from the low HP weak armor issue that tends to be the big issue with most medium tanks. However, it has good speed, it has great DPM, and it has its party trick of Hesh. So, for example, if you're fighting a pretty light lineup, Hesh is your go-to. You can just get their sides, and instead of doing 390 alpha, you're doing 500 alpha. So, a big increase. And on open maps, even Sand River, I've had some really funny games with the Centurion Action X where you just get their sides of like heavy tanks like E5s, Super Conquerors, and you just fight a Hesh and you pen them, and you punish them. So the Centex is pretty great for that, that's for sure. Going on to the tank destroyers, Object 268 version 4 is probably the best and pretty unarguably the best. It has great armor frontally, good speed, which means it's great in a push. So if you're in a pushing scenario and you're pushing something pretty aggressively, the 268 version 4 is great. It has a good alpha damage for that, decent penetration. However, its gun handling is pretty poor, so you are going to want to be as close as possible. It isn't great in a brawl because it doesn't have a turret, so you're shooting what's in front of you, and it can be tracked and flanked. So it's a kind of risk-reward kind of scenario taking 268 version 4s. But pretty good tank, and if it's your only tank, you'll do well with it. Then we've got the Foch B. This tank is gonna kind of be an all-or-nothing tank. You probably want your best player in terms of aim and game sense to be playing the Foch B, because its clip is great. It's got decent speed to be able to get into position and do that early game clip, and it has the armor to be able to bounce enough shots to do that clip. However, when it's clipped, it's useless. So you're going to want your best player in that tank so they can make sure they are penning every shot they fire, making sure they maximize that clip, and can then take an intelligent position to be able to reload to then have more game impact. The issue with 7v7 sometimes is the game can be over before you've reloaded. So you do that initial clip, then they may just go, oh, well, they've clipped us. Oh, well, fuck it, we'll just push onto you. You're a tank down. Yeah, that's when you can struggle. But if you've got an intelligent player who's playing a Foch B, they can have unreal impact. They can do a full clip, first of all, take an intelligent position where they're not going to get pushed and die, and then they can come in and do a second clip, maybe even a third clip. So the Foch B is a kind of risk-reward tank, pretty much all in. But yeah, it's a tough tank to play, but if played well, it can be really, really good. And then finally, the Ho-Ri 3. And this one's a little bit of a... It can be on there, cannot be on there, but I think it's pretty good just because it's pretty quick. It has decent rotation speed, so it's hard to get flanked. It has good alpha, decent DPM, trollish armor. However, it does suffer from the same issues as most tank destroyers of having low HP and no turret. But the Ho-Ri, I think, is pretty good just because of its penetration as well. So if you do get on a more distance-sensitive map, the Ho-Ri will just farm. It's got great penetration, good gun handling. It will have just kind of more flexibility than most TDs, which also will farm in those scenarios. It can then also be played on the Ensks, the Himmelsdorfs. It will also perform on those as well. But obviously, it is slightly more map dependent. But once again, as I said in the middle, there are so many tanks that would work. These are just my opinions on the best ones. For TDs, for example, the E4 is another good choice. The E3 is a decent choice, however, it's very slow. For medium tanks, the E50M is another good choice. What else? The Leo 1 is another good choice. The Caro is okay. TVP is okay. Yeah, there are many choices that just haven't made my list. But this is my opinion on what I think the best tanks are. Do let me know down in the comments if you think I've been an idiot and included one that you disagree with. And I do hope this helps out. Good luck in the event. And if you did like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you all again very soon.